They told you it was just disease. They said consumption and signed the certificates with trembling hands. But if you look closer, beneath the ink, behind the seal, you'll find something else, something darker, something forbidden. In 1823, 15 young men died behind stone walls under the watch of men who claimed to serve God. Each death was identical: convulsions, blackened flesh, unholy tongues. The church buried their names, burned the evidence, silenced the only doctor who saw too much. And now, after 200 years, the truth is clawing its way to the surface. I'm going to show it to you, but be warned. This is not a story, it's a threshold. What you learn today will change you. Once you hear this, there's no return to the world as it was. This is not just a tale of a cursed seminary. This is the anatomy of control. How institutions use faith as a veil, how power hides behind piety, and how even the holiest grounds can be feeding sites for something inhuman. Listen carefully. This is the truth they buried behind the chapel. The deaths started with Thomas Millikan. You already know that part. What they didn't tell you is what he was studying the night before the convulsions began. It wasn't theology. It wasn't Greek. It was a book that wasn't listed in the seminary's library registry. A book found beneath a loose floorboard in the chapel's sacristy, bound in lambskin, unlabeled, uncatalogued, written in Latin that didn't translate cleanly. Thomas wasn't alone when he found it. James Morrison was with him. So was David Crane, the only one who lived to tell what happened. He said Thomas read one passage aloud. Just one. That's all it took. The chapel candle flickered. A shadow passed over the window, though no one walked outside. They laughed nervously and closed the book. But something had already opened. The sickness didn't begin in Thomas's body. It entered him through language, through sight, through understanding. Because what that book contained wasn't theology. It was a code, a kind of ritual software designed to rewrite the soul. That book didn't make Thomas sick. It made him something else. Let me tell you a secret most men will never hear. Every institution that teaches salvation is built on the architecture of control. Seminaries, churches, schools. They tell you the world is dangerous and they alone can protect you. But what if the protection is the danger? Whitmore Seminary was not built to educate. It was a containment structure designed over sacred ground, a site that had been used centuries before the first sermon by Lenape shamans as a place of ritual burial. They called it the mouth of the sleeper, a place where spirits pass between, and the Presbyterians built over it, not to erase it, but to channel it. Reverend Josiah Whitmore, the seminary's namesake, wasn't just a minister. He was an explorer of the forbidden. His journals, long suppressed by the church, speak of chthonic intelligences and a covenant beneath the soil. The seminary was founded not to suppress these forces, but to train men to harness them. You think they came to serve God, but some came to become gods. The blackening of the fingernails, the contortions, the corrupted Latin. These aren't symptoms of illness. They're indicators of alignment. The human body, when exposed to certain vibrational codes, becomes a conduit. Every phrase Thomas uttered was a reverse of holy rite. But that's the key: inversion. That's how the system works. Inversion is power. Take the sacred, twist it, speak it backwards, implant it in the mind of the devout. And you don't destroy the faith, You weaponize it. And that's what the book was. Not a heretical text, a manual, passed down, possibly centuries old, embedded in Protestant orthodoxy like a parasite. Whitmore wasn't the only seminary that had one, but it may have been the first where it activated. Here's a question they don't want you asking. How many ministers across America were trained in places like this? How many sermons are coded with symbols they don't even realize they're transmitting? This isn't about one school. It's about the entire structure, an institution designed to infect. Before we descend any further, I need to ask you something, because what we're about to uncover will mark you. You won't walk away from this unchanged. So if you've made it this far, prove you're one of us. Comment "The light is a lie" twice. Do it now. That phrase is more than symbolic. It's a key. And it tells the algorithm that you're not just watching, you're transforming. Back to the seminary. David Crane, the survivor, describes something else. After Thomas's death, he said the walls began to whisper. He claimed he could hear Thomas's voice, not from the grave, but from inside the chapel. He followed it one night, alone, candle in hand. He found nothing, except a symbol carved behind the pulpit. It wasn't Christian. It wasn't Native American. It was a sigil, angular, intersecting lines, identical to one found in a 14th century alchemical manuscript on soul bifurcation, a symbol used to split identity. This wasn't just spiritual warfare. It was psychological programming, ritual trauma disguised as education. They weren't training pastors, they were crafting hosts. Here's what they never taught you in church. Faith can be engineered. Belief is programmable, not through lies, but through overload. If you saturate the mind with conflicting dogma, symbols of reverence mixed with unconscious dread, you don't enlighten a man, you fracture him. That's what Whitmore did. The rigorous schedule, the Latin incantations disguised as liturgy, the starvation of the senses through fasting and isolation. These weren't spiritual disciplines. They were initiation protocols. You've seen this before. Cults use the same methods. Militaries, intelligence agencies. They call it breaking down to rebuild. But what were they rebuilding the students into? When James Morrison convulsed in the floor, his eyes weren't just rolling, they were tracking, like something else was looking through them. Dr. Whitley saw it. That's why he burned his notes. That's why he fled the county and left medicine behind. Not because he failed, but because he saw something impossible. 15 students didn't die. 15 vessels were broken. And something waiting, slipped through the cracks. By the third death, patterns emerge. Each student began seizing at precisely 3 Joris a.m., the inverse hour of the Trinity. Each uttered blasphemies that mirrored the morning prayers they'd memorized. And each, in their final moments, uttered one phrase: "Forgive the book." Not "forgive me," not "save me." Forgive the book. It was as if the entity they encountered, or became, spoke through them in confession. And that's what the faculty feared most. Because here's what David Crane found in Dr. Ashford's desk, weeks after the final burial. Another copy, another book, identical binding, same sigil on the spine, hidden inside a false drawer. Annotated, dated 1796, meaning the head of the seminary knew what was buried in the chapel, knew what the original book was for, and chose to replicate it. Ashford wasn't trying to stop the infection. He was distributing it, not in the name of God, in the name of transfiguration. If the devil wears robes, it's not to mock the priesthood, it's to lead it. You were raised to trust the institution, the symbol of the cross, the whisper of doctrine, the hands on your shoulder at the altar. But what if I told you, none of it is neutral? Every ritual is a signal, every structure, a transmitter. Think of it like this. A seminary is a tuning fork, and Whitmore, it was tuned to something ancient, not demonic in the way movies depict, not red horns and pitchforks. No, it was pure inversion, a system that rewards obedience while corrupting the subconscious. What you saw as moral refinement was behavioral coding. What you thought was spiritual growth was identity collapse. And the final exam? It wasn't ordination. It was possession. This wasn't a tragedy. It was a test run. 15 souls, 15 locks, 15 broken seals, and behind each, a sliver of something waiting. If this was an isolated incident, I wouldn't be here. But I am, because what started in 1823 didn't stay buried. The chapel still stands. They bricked up the entrance, poured concrete over the basement floor, and planted roses behind the altar where the unmarked graves lie. But symbols bleed through stone. And in 1976, a local historian, Janet Loffridge, began cataloging Pennsylvania's abandoned religious sites. She found Whitmore, she found the graves, and she found the whispers. Her notes, obtained by a friend of mine under the Freedom of Information Act, describe audio anomalies recorded on cassette at exactly 3 a.m., static, then chanting, then screaming. A single Latin phrase repeated over and over, anima fracta, servus fit. The soul, when broken, becomes a servant. Janet vanished in 1977. No body, no trace. Her research, sealed under state historical records, classified due to religious sensitivity. So ask yourself, who has the power to hide history this effectively? Who benefits when you forget? When your faith is inherited, not questioned? Whitmore isn't gone. It was simply rebranded. Every modern seminary carries its shadow. Now listen carefully, because this final truth is the one that will haunt you. David Crane, the lone survivor, never became a minister. He became a watcher. For 47 years, he lived alone in a cabin 10 miles from Whitmore's ruins. He wrote journals, tracked patterns, obituaries, seminary records. He mapped a network of schools tied to similar outbreaks. Small, quiet, disguised as fevers, mass psychogenic illness, carbon monoxide leaks, but each one followed the same fingerprints. A book, a death, a phrase. Before he died in 1871, he scrawled a final note on the wall of his cabin. It's not a place, it's a program. You understand now, don't you? The architecture of belief was never built to elevate you. It was built to contain you, to train you, to fracture and reform you into something easier to control. You're not supposed to know this. You're not supposed to ask why the chapel had a basement, why the students were chosen young, why the seminary kept operating for decades after. But you do know now, and that knowing is the beginning of your unbecoming. Wake up, speak the phrase in the comments again. The light is a lie. Let them know you see it now, and I'll see you in the next descent.